Okay. Just so everybody knows, this, as we were just saying, is going to be recorded. I will share that along with Will's slides a little bit later this afternoon. For anyone who does not know, this is the lovely Will Angel. He is joining us to talk about just data viz and data science connections in the DC area, what's available to you, what to keep an eye out for, and really just his experience in it. And he has quite a bit, thank goodness. And honestly, I have no more introduction. He will be able to tell you about himself much better than I could. So I'm going to hand it on over.
Cool. Thank you, Ashley. Hi, folks.
Sure.
Know some of you and met some of you at the hackathon with DataKind DC back last year. So good to see some of you again. Like Ashley said, my name is Will Angel. I'm here in Washington, DC, specifically Roslyn, Virginia right now. So just across the river. And I do data professionally. Since graduating from Georgetown college class 2017, I've worked as a data analyst, a marketing data analyst, a product manager, a data product owner, a data scientist, and a senior technical product manager for a data engineering team. And that's across a wide number of industries with many, many, many different data tools. I'm actually starting a new role in a couple of months, or in April, in March, as a data engineer. So more hands-on keyboard, building out data pipelines and data infrastructure. So I've got some slides, and I'm going to tell you about some of the professional networks in the DC area and across the world that have been extremely useful to me in my career, that have made it easier for me to find new opportunities and learn new things. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and go to the slideshow. So the initial topic was going to be just about the data community DC and my data visualization meetup group. I help organize the data visualization DC meetup group, but I realized it would probably be more interesting to you all to talk about sort of professional networks in general, and a couple of the reasons why they're very, very useful for a career in data. So just gonna hit you with the key takeaways right up front. First, participating in data-focused events and these professional organizations will accelerate your career by learning more about how data is used in industry and meeting other data professionals. There are a couple of great professional associations that you can join. And I'll go into each of these in more detail, but sort of internationally and in the US, there's the American Statistical Association, IEEE, and the Data Visualization Society. Highly recommend checking them out, and I'll again go into these in more detail. And then locally, there's the Washington Statistical Society, my group, Data Community DC, and numerous other community groups on meetup.com. And I will actually just go ahead and put all of my links in the chat right now, just so that you can check these out as we go. I'm also going, before we get into the individual groups, going to tell you about a couple of upcoming events. On February 13th, the Data Science DC Meetup is hosting an event on data governance for data mesh. That's going to be a very interesting speaker. And then on February 23rd, the group I organize, DataViz DC, is having an event on open access and data analytics. And we've got some really cool people from the World Bank talking. So that's going to be fantastic. And these are actually both in person as well as hybrid. So before we get into actually these groups, I'm going to talk a little bit about why it makes sense to participate in events and groups like this, and some of the specific things that the specific outcomes that will help your career. So, but first, we're going to ask, what does it mean to increase the velocity of a data science career? So how do you define career velocity? And I'm going to broadly define that as sort of three things. One is achievement, sort of how successful you are, like what kind of things you're doing, all that. Second is compensation. We usually work to get paid. So that's usually a big factor in why people want to do data work, is because it's well compensated. And third is satisfaction. It's fun to do good work, and being able to work on things that you find satisfying is an awesome career outcome. And if you're in a place where the compensation aspect of data science doesn't apply, then that's awesome. Go do cool stuff for nonprofits, change the world. Awesome. So all those things are good. We want, generally to as much as it makes sense without, sacrificing too much other things, we want to have careers that let us achieve things, be well compensated, that are satisfying. So, the more of those we have, the higher our career velocity. So we want to accelerate that. So again, taking a step back, specifically, what does it mean to have a career in data? And I'm going to break this down with saying one, you're a data professional if you get paid to work with data. And there are all sorts of subdomains. So I'm going to be just very generic and say data. You could do data science, data engineering, data analysis, all sorts of similar roles that are data adjacent or data intensive without actually being data scientist roles. And then second, I'm going to say is be useful with data. I've found that the people who aren't able to actually be useful with data tend to not get paid as much or at all for it. So you gotta be able to do both of those things. Now, I will note, neither of these are under your control. If you already have the money, then you don't need to get paid. And again, go do awesome things. You're going to do cool things. But if you want to get paid, that means other people have the money and you need to convince them to give it to you. And again, being useful with data means that useful for someone, useful for some organization, and it's usually not on you to determine what the utility, what the outcomes are of what you get to work on, which means that you have to, this is a collaborative endeavor. So in theory, data science is often described as a combination of statistics, math, and programming, or the sort of pithy quote, a data scientist is someone who knows more about programming than any statistician and more about statistics than any computer programmer. So in theory, that's what data science is. In practice, again, you want to get paid for it, which means it has to be useful for some person or organization that has money, which means business. And so the more statistics, programming, and business the more successful I believe you will be in a career in data. And again, you can make a fine career in any one of these three. And the more overlap you have, the more likely you are to be able to get paid well to do useful, interesting things with data. So a couple of limiting factors here. And again, all of this is approximate. There are many exceptions, but I do believe, I'm willing to go out on a limb and assert that your ability to get paid to work with data correlates with how useful you are with that data. So the better you are at working with data, and that doesn't just mean like how good you are at Pandas or R. It's really about how effective you are at creating useful outcomes. And again, the competency with the tools is very important. But if you're not, if you're able to use the tools right, but don't apply them in the right situation or in an effective way, that's going to limit your career velocity. So because of that, at this point, Georgetown, the analytics program is very good. So all of you actually at this point are more proficient in statistical programming than I am. You all know more about advanced analytics than I do. But I've gotten paid to work as a data scientist. I've gotten, going to be starting as a data engineer soon. So the uncertainty around hiring and skills means that you will be competing with a lot of people who have done an online boot camp or some Coursera courses, or have spent a lifetime working in Excel and think that they're data scientists now. And because of that, it is hard for people trying to hire for data skills to actually understand what skills you have and how credible they are. So the more you can increase the confidence in your expected value, that sort of combination of, again, skills and ability to apply those skills, the more likely people are to pay you for it. So if people think that hiring you will increase the outcomes that they care about, running a successful business, then you're likely to get hired. So I think two ways that you can increase that confidence: demonstrate expertise, and have other people vouch for you. So if one of your professors says you're amazing at Pandas and Tableau, then that, if someone really needs those skills, that's a very good way to have that expertise be vouched for. And one of the things you can do is, again, demonstrate that expertise. And to have that expertise, it helps to know a lot. And there are so many tools in data, it's crazy. And it's a very wide field, which means that there are lots of things that aren't data related, or rather, there are lots of things that aren't directly data science, but are adjacent or several degrees removed, that it can be very helpful to know about. So knowing, and as you've probably experienced at this point, the quality of your data determines a lot of how easy it is to analyze and how effective you are at actually creating some useful analysis. And that means that actually knowing about how data is collected all the way to the source is very important. And sometimes you'll find that the limitations of data collection can get very detailed. And so you start having to care about things like how were surveys distributed, who received a survey. If the survey was digital, do ad blockers break your tracking data? They do. Watch out for ad blockers. Digital analytics data, very messy, but usually not messy, just incomplete in messy ways. So there are a huge number of tools, and this is a chart from 2017. And since then, the number of companies and tools in this space have exploded. So there are thousands of companies and tools that they're all useful for someone or for some application. And the more you know about which ones are good, which ones are okay, which ones are expensive, which ones are good for certain types of analytics, batch versus streaming, what kind of visualizations you want. Do you want something custom based on Tableau, or do you really want more boring business intelligence? Having more of that knowledge does help you, even if you're going to spend most of your time working on a particular data set and a particular set of tools. Having knowledge of how tools are used in industry and how data is used in industry will help you be a more successful professional. So that said, I just showed you a very old and now very old list of tools that is massive, and some of those companies are out of business. And you can just look up lists like that and then say, oh yes, I know of all these tools. And an interviewer may not be able to tell whether you actually know the tools or have just read about them. And evaluating, so from an interviewing perspective, from a hiring manager perspective, the people who you need to convince that you are a data professional who they should hire and pay. Those people, it's really hard. I've hired data scientists, I've hired data engineers, and figuring out who's got a good resume versus who's not, that's hard, because everyone's like, oh yes, I know every data tool under the sun. And likewise, when you put in your resume and a hiring manager looks at that and they see the resume next to it that has all the same skills and a boot camp instead of Georgetown, that's on them to figure out, okay, who do I actually talk to? And then when they talk to you, they ask do you know SQL? And you say, yes. And they're like, great. How would you use distinct in a group by statement? And that's a very, very small quantity of knowledge that's not really representative of how effective you are at everything. So there's a huge amount of uncertainty, and anything you can do to increase people's confidence in your capabilities is very important, hence job referrals. So knowing data people boosts your career in 3 ways. First is learning about jobs. And one thing I've seen a lot of is or maybe not most, but many jobs are being recruited for before they're actually posted publicly. And I know companies that are interested in hiring people, but don't necessarily have the desire or timeline to hire for that role right away. But if they find the right candidate, so if Mike comes in and he's a graduate student at Georgetown and has all this data science knowledge plus his background in education, if there's a company that's looking for like a data analyst or a data scientist to look at education data, if Mike meets someone from that company at an event, that company may say, oh, we're not hiring yet, but let me get your contact information and I'll send you that in like a week. I've seen that happen. So learning about open or soon to be open jobs is a great reason to know lots of data people. Second is referrals for jobs. At a certain point, miscellaneous data people become your friends or acquaintances who do data stuff. And so once if you go to events on a consistent basis, eventually everyone's like, oh yeah, you're another person who comes to these events. And in some cases, they'll be happy to refer you to jobs, which will not get you jobs. But what it will do is it will make your job search much less painful by making it more effective. In my experience, cold applications, just going on LinkedIn, finding a job posting and applying for it, I have a very low, actually, I'd say probably a very high interview rate, maybe 5 or 10%. So for every 10 or 20 jobs that I've cold applied to, I've gotten 1 call back. For jobs where I have had a referral, that's usually 80 or 90%. So you can really increase the efficacy of finding a job by not actually applying to jobs and instead finding people who are hiring. And in many cases, they'll say, "Oh, great, go apply." All of the recruiters know that this smart Georgetown student applied, and what that does is it again increases your odds of getting that initial first round interview with a recruiter or hiring manager, from 5 or 10% to 80 or 90%, which it's a pretty good increase. You are the data people, so I will let you do the math there. And third, like we said, there are a huge number of tools and really lots of different subdomains of data science and data adjacent fields. So having people who also work there that you can ask for help or advice is super useful, because there you can say, hey, the companies that I'm talking to or where I work or whatever, they're picking a database or a data warehouse technology, or they want to change our business intelligence or data visualization tool. Like you can do a lot of Googling and find a lot of articles on medium.com of varying credibility. That's a great way to learn, but it also helps to know other people who have already done all that exact same research and can summarize it for you. So that's sort of why you should consider joining professional organizations and going to data events. So if none of that sounds good, like been nice talking, have a good one. But for the people who are interested in learning more about where these organizations are and where you can find these events, I'm going to talk a little bit about global and national organizations before talking about local ones. So there are sort of 3 that I'm going to recommend: the American Statistical Association, IEEE, and the Data Society. And I will talk about each of those in just a second. So the ASA, American Statistical Association, is a professional association for statisticians. And given that some people say data science is just statistics with a better brand manager, there's a lot of very useful data science content and events at the ASA. Note, they have a discount for students. So you can join for $25, which is an incredible deal. So highly recommend checking them out. They do also have a fair amount of public events in addition to the benefits of being a member. IEEE is the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers, and it has basically branched off from being just electrical engineering to every type of technology engineering. And they specifically have societies for computers and computational intelligence, which works out to IT and data analytics. So highly recommend checking them out. They also have a discounted membership rate for students. And third, for international organizations that I'll recommend is the Data Visualization Society. It is an awesome place to learn more about data visualization and meet other people who are practicing data visualization or anything related to it. So you'll see lots of data scientists, lots of data visualization designers, data analysts. It's awesome. They have a Slack workspace that I think has something like 20,000 people in it right now, and is a super active. They do great events, and they actually back in November hosted the Information is Beautiful Awards here in Washington, DC, which was super fun. So Data Visualization Society, I highly recommend checking them out. And they also have free memberships in addition to some paid tiers. So Data Vis Society, this is the one that I would recommend the most. So those are sort of the international and national organizations that I'll recommend. Now let's talk local to the DC area. So there are sort of two actual organizations and then a website that I'll also plug. So Washington Statistical Society, meetup.com, and my group, Data Community DC. So the Washington Statistical Society is the local chapter of the ASA, the American Statistical Association, and they do awesome local events. They actually have an event tomorrow, which is a virtual seminar, I believe, on like causal analysis in ecosystem modeling, which I put a link. I'll put a link to that at the start, and I will repost that at the end. Sounds super fascinating. Their events, their seminars are open to the general public, but they also have very low cost student dues. I believe it's $3 in addition to the ASA membership, which is quite good. So meetup.com is another, it's a website. It used to be owned by WeWork before it got spun back off, and it is an online events platform. And there are a ton of data groups that post events on Meetup. Some of them are associated with Data Community DC, but there are also events that are just organized by other groups. So I highly recommend signing up to meetup.com and following some groups that look interesting. It's free. It's free to attend, so I highly recommend it. I have met a lot of people through meetup.com, and I think I've had 2 jobs that have come out of meeting people at meetups. So a great way to meet data people, meetup.com. So Data Community DC. Data Community DC is a 501c3 nonprofit that organizes multiple data meetups here in the DC area. Sort of an umbrella organization over a number of different groups. We've got a number of different programs. The 2 big meetups are Data Science DC and my Data Visualization DC meetup group. But there's also the Data Ops meetup in terms of talking about how you do data well. There's statistical seminars, which is more focused on conventional statistics, but the guy who runs that, Mike Jadu, is awesome and does a lot of like Pandas, R, ggplot, sort of all that. We've got the Nova Data Science / Deep Learning event or meetup, the Full Stack Data Science meetup, the Data Wranglers DC, which that one is also awesome and has a weekly data engineering virtual lunch, Data Education DC, Statistical Programming DC, and gender diversity around the axis, or GData DC, which is our diversity in data group. So those are sort of an overview of the different meetups we have right now. And I'll talk a little bit more about my group specifically, Data Visualization DC. So DataVis DC is a monthly or more meetup group, and we meet to talk about everything data viz related. So sometimes that's more about data collection, sometimes it's more about business intelligence, sometimes it's more about design, communication, and we love talking about data visualization, and how to make data useful. We've got almost, I think it's like 10,800 members on meetup.com, and the group is almost at 10 years since its first event, which was back in, I believe, February of 2013. And we've had since then 135 events. I've only been involved with it for a few years, but it's been around for a while, and lots of people have been to our in-person events. So yeah, you should definitely check out our event on the 23rd, which, yeah, where we've got open access and data analytics. Got this slide again. And the data science DC event has their event on February 13th next week, which is about data governance for data mesh. If any of you aren't aware, data mesh is was one of the hottest topics of last year, despite it being mostly a fad. But yeah, that's what I've got for content. Feel free to contact me. I use LinkedIn a lot, so connect with me on LinkedIn. And yeah, I posted the links. So if folks have questions or comments, I'd love to hear them. I do actually have a few things that I'll share. I'll just actually go through these. For the Washington Statistical Society, their seminar tomorrow is online, and I posted a link to this, and that is on causal analysis and ecology. Fascinating topic. For Data Wranglers DC, they have their weekly data engineering lunch. Next Monday is going to be on an EDA design platform, which is a tool called Solus, which I have no experience with, so I look forward to learning more about that. For Data Science DC, again, Monday, February 13th, and that's going to be in person at GW as well as hybrid. And likewise for my data visualization meetup group, we're going to be at GW again, but also hybrid on February 23rd. And I think earlier in the presentation, I shared a image from 2017 of all of the AI and ML big data tools. This is the one from 2021, which, as you can see, has gotten even bigger. So there's a lot of tools, and it's very helpful to attend some of these groups so that you can learn more about the people and the tools. So that's all I've got. Any questions, comments, concerns?
This was great, Will. Thank you. I think it's great to know about all of what's happening around DC so our students can join them. And also I like the fact that you mentioned in your earlier slides about the portfolio, having a portfolio, and also having referrals and somebody who can vouch for their the skills. That's good for a job hunt. I think those are important things, because we do have, in all of our most of our classes, we have final project portfolio. So I'm happy to hear this. Yeah.
Yep. I will also immediately contradict myself. You can get a job without a portfolio. You can get a job from cold applying. You don't have to go to events, but you will find that it's probably a lot easier.
Yeah.
One thing to note, as if you choose to build out a portfolio or just do interesting projects as part of your required classes, a lot of the meetup groups love to have speakers. So if you are interested in presenting some of your work, feel free to get in touch with me, and I can put you in touch with the relevant people. Data science, data engineering, web scraping, data visualization, all of that So if you are interested in practicing your presentations, we've got lots of venues where you can do that. For data visualization DC, we can go all the way down to a 5-minute lightning talk, a little Viz and Tell. So I actually got a sign up link for that on the meetup page. So if you're interested in signing up to get up there for 5 minutes, we've got that. If you're very confident or have something very interesting and want to do a deep dive into an end-to-end capstone project and want a full 30 minutes or an hour or 2 hours, that we can also do that too, and are happy to work with you to go from not having a presentation to having a presentation.
That would be great for our students. I think for those who are applying for jobs as well as for PhD programs, I think it would be great to have this kind of experience in their resume. I think that would be awesome to have that like present, maybe like saying, or have presented in this DC community, in this organization. That would be a great addition to their resume. Thank you, Will.
Yeah, and I do actually list my meetup and conference presentations on my resume, and it's almost as long as my job experience at this point.
Yeah,
but it's a great way to list some experiences on your resume. So instead of saying just you've got these skills, you can say gave a presentation to this meetup group on some topic.
Yep.
I just wanted to reiterate, it's basically exactly what you said throughout the talk, but just how it is super important to take advantage of those networking opportunities. Like networking is so important when you're, trying to get jobs or trying to get, PhD programs. And you're kind of in a unique, like DC is like a very good place for it. Like, you might get a job, excuse me, later in life where, if you end up in a kind of smaller city and you're just not going to have that level of participation that you're going to get here in DC. So like these groups are more active here just because the federal government is here and there's a large data presence in the area. So like now is a special time. You might move after you're done at Georgetown, so now is a great time to take advantage of that, in particular if you want to stay if you want to stay in the DC area, which is a very an excellent place to be for data science type jobs.
And a number of the associations that I membered have their headquarters here in DC. I believe that the IEEE has their headquarters, I think it's on L or K Street downtown.
So take advantage of it, while you're at Georgetown, you use the time to network as much as possible.
And also for the, I think it would be beneficial for the international students as well, who I know for international students, they wish to have someone sponsor because of their visa status. So I think it would be great to have some network. It's great to have someone who's willing to sponsor. So I think networking would be very beneficial for international students, right? Yeah.
Yep. And one thing I will also add there is, when I was an undergrad at Georgetown, I read some networking books and was like, ew, I don't want to network and go and ask people like for a job. Like that sounds gross. So I recommend thinking about it as meeting interesting data people. You're not networking, you're going there to meet interesting data people. And I recommend going before you need a job. So start now, go to events. And over time, if you consistently go to events, if you find them fun and enjoyable and interesting, if you consistently go, people will recognize you. You're like, oh yeah, you're back.
Exactly. Yeah.
And one of the things that is so helpful about having those connections, knowing people, is if you've shown up at several events and have been pleasant or even just neutral to interact with, that can be a huge plus, because one of the biggest issues I've seen with bad hires in industry is personality fit. That's enough for a referral in most cases, because again, a referral doesn't automatically get you a job. It just gets you past the resume screen, which if you've got a good data role available, you will get hundreds of resumes for a single position. So if you can get past that, you increase your odds and increase the efficacy of your job search so that you only have to do a little bit of job searching instead of a lot of job searching.
Mhm. Yeah.
That's part of the
Can you
reason
say-
we make you do so many group projects. Like teamwork is so critical. I mean, you have to be able to work on a team. It's not an isolated, there's very few isolated careers in being able to be a good team player, comment your code nicely, which we always talk about, document your code nicely, have collaborative tools. It's really, really, really important because again, like a lot of times just being a normal person and a friendly and a kind person goes a long way. Exactly. Just to reiterate the point, it is really
Yeah.
important. And, that's kind of why we do so
I-
many group projects.
Yeah, I agree like 100%, more than 100% with that, because I'm always telling students, I'm encouraging students to be kind and professional. So I think, yeah, that would be, because we also interview people for many things. So we also want somebody who can get along with the team, right? Who is also skillful and but at the same time, who's a good person. That's easy to work with. So yeah, I agree with you.
Does anyone have any questions for Will, either on his experience, on job hunting within the field, on any of the meetup groups or events? You can put them in the chat or come off mute. You do not have to turn your camera on.
Yeah, if folks have questions about anything data related, happy to chat. Again, I've done data analyst work, data science work, predictive analytics, machine learning, lots of data engineering, business intelligence for days. Mike.
Hey, well, thanks again for the talk. It's really a lot of really great information. I know you mentioned that you've both, obviously you've worked in the data space, but that you've also hired in the data space. So what would you say, in your opinion, are some of maybe some of the most impactful resume points that really stick out to you when you make a good hire, and maybe some faux pas to kind of avoid when making our own resumes?
Yeah, so when hiring for any job, what I look for and what most hiring managers are looking for is, can this person do the job? And in a regular interview process, you don't have the time to have 100% confidence on that. So that means that as a hiring manager, I'm looking for signals of, do I think this person can do a job, or can do the job that we're trying for? And in data, this does get really hard because a lot of companies don't actually have the expertise to write good job descriptions for their data people. I am seeing this start to change, but there are a lot of places where, a data science role says that you'll, be skilled in data visualization, machine learning, deploying machine learning, web scraping, programming, everything. And it's very unusual that that's actually what's truly expected. And so it can be hard to figure out exactly what the role is. So list relevant, list work experience on your resume. If you've got prior experience, even if it's not data related, that is actually a positive signal. So if you have work experience, definitely list that. I think coming out of Georgetown's program, I think I've seen a number of resumes that list relevant projects almost as if they were work experience. I think that's a pretty decent thing to do. Definitely list some of the skills that you're most comfortable with. For larger companies, they do some keyword screening. I like startups, I like smaller companies. I tend to avoid the larger companies that do keyword screening. And again, if you are getting referrals to companies or just have that connection, you can effectively skip the resume screen where you don't need that. So put work experience, put skills, proofread your resume, and then get someone else to proofread it, and then get a third person to proofread it, because a typo or consistency in your resume is very awkward, because resumes are expected to be one of the most attention to detail oriented documents that you will ever produce. That's so if there's inconsistency in like, do you have the sentences in relevant experience with a period or not? If you're inconsistent there and someone notices that, that's a pretty negative signal. So, I got a question in the chat about asking to find an internship in the fall. Now, internships are challenging because there are a lot of companies who do like have internships. I'm not entirely sure how the economy is going to impact that this year, because there are a lot of people who are tightening belts, which means internship programs might not be quite as vibrant. But I recommend starting now. And one thing you can do is if you go to meetup events or data events and say, hey, I'm a student, I'm starting to think about like fall internships. A lot of people, if they like you, some companies may be willing to create an internship just for you. Ashley.
I was just clapping and saying I fully support that internships, like the networking aspect of this, it's not just for jobs, it's for internships as well. It's anything career related, that's always going to help you. I was just applauding that statement. Yes.
Yeah, but no, that's exactly that. And an internship, like when it comes to like different levels of seniority, for an internship, most companies do not expect interns to do meaningful work. And in some cases, actually companies, especially for unpaid internships, I believe companies are actually not allowed to have unpaid internships for like core business activities, which there are lots of places where not everyone quite follows that. And there's some ambiguity about, what's a core business activity. But from a certain perspective, internships are not expected to actually be a net return on a company's investment, because they're putting in time. Sometimes they pay you. So it's really expected to be a learning opportunity for you and a way for the company to potentially like build goodwill, brand recognition, and have a way to sort of test whether you'd be potentially a good fit for a full-time role. So especially for the larger companies, like the big tech companies, those internship programs are very explicitly intended to be learning opportunities for you and ways for them to see if they should try and recruit you once you're done with school. Oh, great question. Are the slides available? Well, they're not yet, but if you give me just a second, let me see. They are now.
And I'll resend those out this afternoon along with the recording as well.
Excellent. I'm going to repost the links, all the links that I shared at the start as well, for anyone who joined late. It's got links to all of the different societies, a bunch of meetup groups, and some of the images and things that I shared.
As well as Will's LinkedIn and his website and Twitter, which you should definitely check out as well. And if anybody else has any other questions, please feel free to chime in now.
Oh, that's a great comment about companies requiring experience for internships. And I think there are some places where job descriptions are more of wish lists than requirements. So one of the best pieces of advice that I ever received was, if you think you're like a 20% fit for a role, go ahead and apply. Personally, I absolutely despise throwing resumes and applications into the void for computers to ignore. So I like to have a human connection before I apply somewhere to sort of avoid that. It's also, again, if you meet people that are hiring for a company, oftentimes they may have some knowledge of like, oh yeah, we're trying to hire for this role, or we have this internship program, and it might say, data science intern, 10 years data science experience required. to exaggerate for comedic effect. But if you know someone at the company, they may say, oh yeah, like actually we just want people who, aren't totally green, like people who have some working knowledge of like, Excel or like some real business data experience, even if it's not applicable. So yeah, it's, again, job description requirements are very much wish lists, not hard requirements. Yep. And one thing I will say about internships is if you are, if you can do useful things with data, people will pay you for that, regardless of whether it's an internship or not. So if you have valuable data skills and can apply them in a way that is sort of legible and packageable, you can just, regardless of it being a proper internship or not, you can make decent to good money doing freelance data work.
You think connections in like in any of these organizations, professional networking would assist with doing that freelance data work as well?
Absolutely. And even if you're not interested in trying to do freelance data work, which that really puts a lot of emphasis on the business side, because then you have to like find people, make sure that you're actually able to do something useful in a reasonable time frame for an acceptable price. A lot of these professional societies also have companies who sponsor them, and they have internships as well. So I know that they also have like jobs boards, that kind of thing. So they're great places. If you're looking for internships, another really good resource that I did not list here is Georgetown's Alumni Network. There are, though I suspect that, many of y'all have already talked to some of those people to try and find internships for the whole program. But there are also lots of people on the alumni network who you can reach out to them and say, hey, I'm looking, you work in data or something related to data. I'm looking for internships. Can you give me advice on finding them? Or do you know anyone who's looking to hire an intern? And oftentimes they'll say, oh, well, I'm not hiring for an intern, but my former coworker who's now over at some other company, they're trying to hire data analyst interns.
Well, I was going to say, if we don't have any more questions, we will let Will go here. But I do want to thank you again and echo Perna's and James's thank you for spending time with us and giving us so many great resources. And yes, again, everybody, reach out to Will. He's incredibly responsive and has just some great, energy and helping folks to feel more comfortable connecting out in the data viz and the data science world. So absolutely. I will be sending this recording out later today, along with another copy of the slides. And if you have any questions later, don't hesitate, I'm sure, to email Will and ask.
Thank you so much, Will. It was great.
Quite welcome.
Okay. Bye.
Cool. Take care, all.
Thank you all for joining. Bye.